Despair is one of the deepest psychological states because it is not simply sadness or disappointment. It is the feeling that suffering has become larger than the possibility of change. A person experiencing despair may struggle to imagine a future that feels meaningfully different from the present. Hope becomes difficult to access. Motivation weakens, and even ordinary responsibilities can begin feeling overwhelmingly heavy. Unlike temporary sadness, which can move and change with circumstances, despair can create the perception that nothing will improve regardless of effort. The mind becomes trapped inside a narrow interpretation of the future, using present pain as evidence that future pain is inevitable. This is why despair can distort time itself. The past appears filled with failures or losses. The present feels unbearable, and the future seems like merely a continuation of everything that already hurts. Psychological despair can emerge after prolonged stress, repeated disappointment, profound loss, isolation, humiliation, trauma, or circumstances that make a person feel powerless. When attempts to change a situation repeatedly fail, the mind may eventually stop expecting its efforts to matter. This can produce emotional exhaustion and withdrawal. The person may stop pursuing opportunities, stop reaching toward relationships, or stop believing that their actions can influence their circumstances. Despair, therefore, becomes not only an emotion but a psychological prediction. The belief that effort will no longer produce meaningful change. The deeper psychology of despair involves the collapse of perceived possibility. Human beings can tolerate enormous difficulty when they believe the difficulty has meaning, an endpoint, or the possibility of transformation. Suffering becomes psychologically heavier when it appears pointless and permanent. This is why connection, purpose, and agency can be so important in recovering from despair. A person does not necessarily need to solve their entire life to begin moving forward. Sometimes the first step is simply restoring a small sense of influence over something manageable. Completing one task, reconnecting with another person, maintaining a routine, seeking support, or taking care of the body can gradually challenge the belief that nothing matters. Despair often tells the mind that change must be dramatic before it counts, but psychological recovery frequently begins through small experiences that contradict hopeless expectations. It is also important to distinguish existential despair from severe or persistent mental health symptoms. When hopelessness becomes intense, lasts for a prolonged period, or interferes substantially with daily functioning, professional mental health support can be important. Despair should not be treated as a personal failure or something that must simply be endured alone. The deepest psychological shift occurs when the future stops being viewed as a guaranteed repetition of the past. The past can influence expectations without determining what comes next. A person may have experienced profound loss without being permanently defined by loss. They may have failed without becoming a failure. They may have been rejected without becoming unworthy. Despair becomes less absolute when possibility is allowed to exist alongside pain. Hope does not always begin as optimism or certainty. Sometimes it begins as the smallest willingness to remain open to the possibility that life can become different. The mind does not need to see the entire path forward. Sometimes it only needs enough psychological space to believe that the present moment is not the final version of the story.